This comment is asking if I could make a video explaining what tankies are. Sure, so originally the term tankie popped up in the 1950s to refer specifically to members of the British Communist Party who supported the Soviet Union's use of tanks in violently putting down the Hungarian Revolution. And over time, the definition has broadened to effectively mean dogmatic leftists who uncritically support fascist regimes who commit genocide while claiming to be communist. And they justify this stance using a very simple axiom. Any government structure that is anti-US is good. Now, tankies will tell you that tankie is a pejorative term used by baby leftists who refuse to take substantive action to actually bring about the revolution. The problem with that, though, is that what they almost exclusively mean by substantive action is genocide.
Oh my god, that was just complete word diarrhea. What the fuck, bro? Have you ever even talked to any of us? What the fuck? Okay, you know what? To call us genocide deniers is complete nonsense, okay? I'll put up some links, but you know, these were not genocides. These were multifactorial events where there was government error, but there was also natural factors involved. Second of all, to say that we support any single government that's anti-American, not at all. Not at all. I do not support Russia at all. I do not support the Iranian government. I support it against American imperialism, but it's a reactionary government. To say that we have no criticisms at all of these governments, I heavily criticize Stalin's Great Purges. I heavily criticize his handling of collectivization. I heavily criticize his deportation of minorities that were believed to be Nazi collaborators. But to call us Nazis, to call these governments Nazis, what the fuck, bro? Are you even a leftist? What? These governments massively improved the lives of their people. They massively increased life expectancy. They massively educated millions, taught them how to read, gave them food. Yes, they gave them food. Oftentimes it's a meme. Communism, no food. But the Soviet Union had about this food production same as India in 1917. By the end of the Soviet Union, it had the same as Western Europe, which had pillaged the whole world in order to develop to that point. In addition to that, these governments did have democracies. They worked off of democratic centralism. And in the late Soviet Union, people had the ability to fire their managers. That's an immensely democratic process. And guess which government killed the Nazis? How are we? Pinche gringo. Look, if you hate us, you hate us. Just don't make up scarecrows, bro. Just don't. Talk to us. Talk to us. You know, we are largely on the same side. Unless you're trying to Rosa Luxemburg me. Actually, I think you guys might Rosa Luxemburg me. Come at me, bitch. Rosa Luxemburg me. Come on. And I think one thing that's very hard for Americans to understand is poverty, right? Peasant poverty. My parents grew up in rural South India where feudal modes of production were still around, where the caste system was still around, where people still got around with a ox and a horse carriage, right? And I think it's really hard for Americans, not downplaying American poverty, but to really just understand how evil that kind of poverty is, how amazing even just having a doctor or being able to read for the first time in your life or being able to have your kids survive. That's why life expectancy mostly went up in these countries. It wasn't that people started living longer. It's that kids stopped dying. Having your kids actually survive because you're able to get them health care. I don't think Americans really realize how amazing it is, how you guys do not really understand the violence of that kind of poverty because Americans are very removed from that kind of world generationally wise. I'm only one generation away from it. The kind of lives that my parents lived and my grandparents lived is 3 or 4 generations for Americans. It's only one for me. That's not to downplay American poverty, but even the poorest American has access to, modern technology. That's not something that was available at all to my parents. And when you come from a peasant perspective, the kinds of lives that my parents were living, these governments were amazing. amazing. They revolutionized these people's lives. It's no wonder that these people saw these leaders and these governments as godlike, formed cult of personalities around them. Not that that's justified. I don't really support cult of personality, but hearing stories about how my parents lived and reading about how these countries freed so many people from poverty, gave them homes, gave them food, gave them education, gave them the ability to read, gave them a doctor. It's just, I think that's very hard for Americans to understand. It really is. It really is. It also gives you dignity. I think dignity is something that most peasants really lack. Oftentimes they're seen as inhuman. And I think what these governments really did was give these people dignity and hope for the first time in their lives that they really never experienced before. And, I have family members who are communists within India. My uncle and his son are the leaders of our state's Maoist party. He's the vice president. And here's a man who has fought his whole life, been in and out of jail his whole life fighting for workers' rights. There's stories of him, there was a teacher who was that he knew, his friend, who was supposed to get a raise, right? Government guaranteed raise. And the local corrupt government didn't give her that raise. And he went up to her boss and he gave him hell. He gave her boss hell until he gave her damn raise. Here's a man who's been out on the streets protesting, who's been tortured by police, who's been in and out of jail, fighting for the poor, fighting for workers, fighting for the disenfranchised, fighting for Dalits, low caste people, his whole life. And to call him a fascist, that just really hurts me, man. Like, I know that this shouldn't be emotional, but fuck you for calling that man a fascist, right? Everything that man stands for, fuck off, on God.